All right, we are live. Yay! Thank you, Johnny.
We did it.
You did it. All right. Hello. Good morning. Yeah. Whatever. Hi, GitOpsians. How are you? I'm not functioning at an English level right now, obviously. So I will keep my introduction short, which is to say, very short. There are no announcements, so I'll just hop straight to it. So we're joined today by two of the Keptn, I'll let you decide, maintainers. We have Florian and Giovanni, and I'm not going to try to introduce these gentlemen. I'll let them do it themselves. So Flo, we're going to kick it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us here. Nice to meet you, everybody. I'm Flo. I'm a software engineer here at Dynatrace, and I've been a Keptn maintainer for a little bit over 5 years now. So, yeah, very excited to tell you all about the recent developments we have made in this project. All right, handing over to Giovanni.
So, hi everyone, I'm Giovanni. I'm also a Keptn maintainer, senior software engineer at Dynatrace. I joined Keptn around 4 years ago, and now I'm part of the technical committee of it.
Beauty, thanks. So we actually had a look at Keptn on this stream more than a year ago now. I'm still trying to find the old episode, and that was with Andy Gapner, right? And I'm bad. There was one other person with him, but I forgot the name.
Oleg.
Oleg, thank you. Gosh, what would I do without you? Not remember names, clearly. So from what I understand, though, it's been a minute since we've had a look at Keptn, and Keptn's kind of changed, right?
Quite a lot, I would say.
Yeah. A lot can happen in a year. So, let's just take a look at this as if we've never seen it before. I will maybe find the previous stream link for folks if they're curious, but otherwise, it's in the playlist on YouTube. Oh, beauty. Look at Johnny go. Fastest fingers in the not quite as west as me west. Yeah, so I think you guys have some slides, some demos. Let's get to it.
Yeah, maybe I can start with a journey around what Keptn was and what Keptn is. So I prepared a very fancy slide deck. I don't know if you can see my screen. I guess yes.
Yes, we can see it, but we're probably going to need a little bit of zoom for the folks at home. Yeah.
Perfect. That should be better.
Yes.
So this slide deck is composed by stealing from Andy, right and left, and from other open source presentation that we did around Keptn. So I don't want to take the credit for all of this. But what Keptn was, 1 year ago when Andy presented here, Keptn was aggregator of a different orchestrator of different tools around the CNCF because, as we know, CNCF tools are plenty, and everyone can customize their own pipeline in the way that they prefer. A Keptn make this customization of your pipeline easier. And we had some opinion also on how this pipeline should look like in order to produce the best software ever. And we had this concept of SLO, service level objective. Through that, also Keptn evolved to be also kind of a delivery tool or assisting you to deliver your application. So you could configure a pipeline that would build the software, then test it, verify that the quality is good, and if everything is fine, then promote to the next stage. Everything was built around cloud events, an open standard, so it was basically a message system. And any integration with Keptn can be done with a bit of glue magic code that understands these events and react upon them. So you could integrate easily your own load tester tool of choice or your observability platform choice to retrieve metrics to detect if quality is good or bad. Quite easily, just implemented this small interface that reads an event and understands what to do. However, after a few years in the wild with this project, we started when Kubernetes was a thing, but not the thing. There were people that wanted to use still on-premise or on just more lean container runtime like Docker Swarm. So we didn't really buy into Kubernetes. And we received many feedback around not everything is perfect. So we tried to now redesign Keptn in order to satisfy all the good things that we learned from Keptn v1 but also support with an architecture that really is more focused on Kubernetes. It's more easy to run, less resource hungry, and it fits better into the GitOps world, because with Keptn v1, having GitOps was quite of hard. It was mainly targeted towards, let's say, Jenkins pipeline. Try to solve this mess of having a lot of pipelines that you want to uniformize. So what we did is we built everything in an operator or a set of different operators. So now when you deploy something through your GitOps tool of choice, can be Argo, can be Flux, or can be any tool, eventually those manifests will be hitting your cluster, your Kubernetes cluster. Keptn can watch for this and try to create the pipeline that we were doing before for verifying the quality of your deployment, of your software that you want to deliver in your cluster. And we introduced the concept of pre and post things that you can run. Pre things can be some validation hooks. For instance, you want to run a scan on the image that you want to deploy to check that there are no open vulnerability in this container, for instance. So you deploy only software that is safe. Or also, you can have a query towards your observability platform to verify that there is no open incident in your cluster. So deploying the next version of your application is safe. And after the deployment, also to run things like a load test, and then SLI analysis to verify the quality of your application. And not only that, since now Keptn lives next to the application where it's deployed, we can continuously watch your definition of application health and continuously monitor it in order to let you then try to react if you see that there is a degradation of the quality of your application. Because after you deploy, let's say with Argo, you know that the sync went well or bad, but you don't know if now the response time of the new version of my application is still in a reasonable amount of time, or it spiked up to 5 minutes before my user get an answer. So we can provide a better application health with Keptn through SLO, continuously watching for it. Out of the box, we also monitor everything that is happening inside your cluster while you deploy the next version of your application. So we can also provide you with observability metrics, traces and metrics in particular that can be used in order to verify if something goes wrong during a deployment, where it went wrong and why it went wrong. But also support teams to collect their metrics, because we know when things are being deployed in your cluster, so we can provide you the last pieces of information about the DORA metrics, which is our golden standard to verify or measure how efficient you are in deploying software. So far, any questions or?
Nope. I think
Perfect.
You can keep going.
Awesome. So, still many slides. Before I said pre and post deployment things, and in particular, we do two different things. One is a task and one is an evaluation. We run first a task and then an evaluation. Why these two differences? Because the task is an action. For instance, it can be a container that you run in order to send us like notification or check if or configure some policies, network policies, before you start the deployment. And an evaluation instead is a collection of a metric to be evaluated against a specific target. So you can run things like check the infrastructure state. Is my infrastructure healthy? So I open my observability tool and ask how many open problems there are in my cluster. And I want them to be 0 before I continue with the deployment. And everything before in the pre-deployment phase that fails, Keptn will stop the deployment. So your Kubernetes manifests are applied to your cluster, but no resource will be allocated. So we can really prevent the deployment to occur. This way, if there is an open infrastructure issue, you won't deploy the next version of your application, so you won't create more havoc and more chaos to have more red alerts everywhere around you that makes you panic. And as a post-deployment, as I already said before, the example about load test, SLO analysis. And on the application health check, we have a concept called Keptn analysis, where you can define a set of different metrics that you can want to check on the result of your application, and you can also compare them against values. So you can have a proper SLO, SLI validation. You can also, from Keptn V1, we create our own concept where you can have weights, key SLIs. All the good things are still over to the new version of Keptn. And this is an operator. So we are hooked into the Kubernetes primitives, and we provide everything out of the box for you. So you don't need to modify your application, besides providing this Keptn analysis.
Real quick, before you move on, I have a question about the dry run for network. Little box at the bottom.
Yes.
So you said check infrastructure state, but then this is its own little, sorry, people are texting me. Now you all hear chocobos. This is its own little thing off down here in the corner. What is this dry run and how is it different?
I think because this stems from one of our first examples, because one problem we saw, at least in as a demo case to build around Keptn V2, was to verify that I can reach a service, because usually I run my database somewhere else outside of my cluster, and I want to check if I deploy my application that requires this database, I can reach and send traffic and receive traffic from this external database. So you can do a network check, because usually you have network policies that are handled by another team, not by your own team. So you can verify also these type of things.
Awesome, thank you.
No worries. Yeah, I already explained a bit here. In terms of observability, we produce traces that describe everything that is occurring in your deployment. So you can have a single trace that describes the moment that manifests are hitting your cluster, Keptn running task and evaluation, then Kubernetes taking over this manifest and really allocating resources to schedule a pod to a specific node, and then also verifying everything that is happening after from Keptn that checks the post-deployment tasks and evaluations and analysis. So we will have a trace made by multiple spans, and each one describes the different stages of your deployments. And you can then drill down into those spans to also see if something went wrong, why it went wrong. And this should help you to narrow down the scope where you need to look at in order to fix an error where Argo says application health degraded. We use OpenTelemetry for exposing all the observability data, so we don't have any preference against any tools. You just hook your own OpenTelemetry collector, and then you send the data in your observability platform of choice. So you can integrate with your own existing infrastructure, existing tool and pipeline and alerting system that you have. So another component that we have beside creating this observability of your deployment is try to abstracting the different metrics provider, because there are a lot of observability tools, and OpenTelemetry solves one-way problem where I want to collect some telemetry data and export it to my observability tool, and they use OpenTelemetry as a standard to communicate this information. But now I collected a lot of metrics out of my infrastructure, a lot of my applications, and I want to now to make use of them. And now I want the reverse arrow. And we try to create an abstraction where you need to provide a single way to translate all of these observability tool of choice query languages into something that Keptn then translate into Kubernetes native metrics. So then you can hook your own tools using the standard Kubernetes metrics APIs, and it's way easier to pick your own tool of choice. So you can define Keptn metrics, which is this abstraction around a metric that you can fetch from multiple providers. And you can hook Argo to watch for this metric, or you can hook also HPA, horizontal pod autoscaler, to scale up and down your replica count of a pod based on the response time, for instance. And the cool thing is we have an abstraction where you can have your Keptn metric, and based on which provider you fetch it from, you can simply switch from Datadog to Dynatrace, from Prometheus to Honeycomb, and nothing has then to change on the layer where you want to use this metric. So you don't need then to change your HPA configuration. And this is what we call Keptn metric server, which is yet another operator that is deployed with Keptn. Oops. And yeah, maybe this is a very bad slide. I should have zoomed in before joining this call. I'm also not a professional, as you might have seen. What we do is try to also provide as many magic out of the box for you as possible. And it's quite common that you deploy things via Helm charts or Argo applications, whatever tool you're using, but you try to group together different microservices that, or different resources that belong to a single microservice together. At Keptn, since it sits in front of your Kubernetes cluster, I can see all the manifests that have been applied. You can also try to collect around and see how the different manifest belongs together and try to create, I noticed that this set of pods, ingress, and infrastructures are belonging together to the first application, and this other set of pods belong to a different application. So we identify out of the box this logic, and we create traces and metrics independently for these two entities. So you don't need to change anything in your manifest.
Just for the benefit of the audience, because the slide says, declare your apps as CRDs. So I just popped the documentation from Kubernetes on what a custom resource definition is. If you happen to not already know that information, it's now there for you in the chat. So I also went ahead and added documentation on OpenTelemetry corresponding to the earlier slide. So just keep an eye as he's going through. I will further clarify certain acronyms with documentation supplementing.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me zoom back.
I do have a basic question.
Yes.
So if you can go back to your other slide. So yeah, so here, right, like I see you have like Jenkins and Argo and Tecton and all the craziness that's up there, right? Does Keptn provide that service out of the box? So instead of me having, so maybe I don't want any of those anymore. Maybe I'm so sick of Jenkins and Tecton that I don't want to use any of that stuff, and like, because it seems like this is a pretty holistic platform, right? Mm-hmm. So then, with that said, does that mean that Keptn has like a Keptn pipelines that I could go in and start writing my own deployment pipelines with, then that integrates into the platform? Okay, so it's really an ingest and then output. Okay.
Yes, in Keptn V1, we try also to solve the pipeline issue, but we discovered that pipelining is a quite hard problem, and there are tools that are doing that job, and they are targeted to solve that issue, and they do a better job than us, so they can work with us. We just complement each other.
You have an opinion, but this isn't it, right? Like,
yeah.
we don't want to make this our problem.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I mean, pipelines are great, right? It's just a whole bunch of bash forever, and then you're done. You solved it.
Love the show. Love the show.
Sorry. Carry on.
Okay. So I wanted to show a bit, but also Flo, I guess we show later in a full-fledged demo. But this is how a trace looks like in Jaeger UI, where you can see here the whole trace describe a full application that is comprised currently of a single microservice. We could call it Simple Node 3.0. And then each span, you can see the things happening. Then on the different workload, you can see where Kubernetes start to pick up and start to really deploy everything. So you can see that it took 1 minute 20 seconds to deploy this pod, this container, and then everything that happens afterwards. And this will help you to also drill down. If something goes off, you will see an error next to a span, and you understand then through the different logs why it fails. I have an example here where if I drill down, I added an evaluation. After the deployment is finished, I want to check my response time. Is my application still answering queries in very short amount of time? And you can see that now my application is answering with 836 milliseconds as a response time. And I want, as a target, less than 300. So I can then send a Slack notification for a team to pick up this issue and start to figure out why now the response time spiked up. And beside this, we also collect different DORA metrics. you can see we can have different type of dashboards. An example here from Grafana, we can also see how many successful deployment you have, how many are failed, how many active deployments are currently running in your cluster, because maybe if this number is too high, you want to try to create some sort of scheduling around. So you create less chaos around your Kubernetes cluster. Average time between deployments, and also all different versions that you deployed, how long do they take? So you can see that you did in version 102 only 20 seconds, and then something bad happened and took 100 seconds more compared to the previous version. Yeah.
So is this like a template Grafana dashboard that ships with Keptn? Like these templates and these boards with these same logics exist for anybody out of box, or would everybody have to make their own boards?
No, those are default boards that we ship with Keptn that you can import into your own Grafana system. But then we expose many more metrics. This is just we are backend engineers mostly, not very UI centric. That's also a big difference between V1 and V2. We drop the UI support and we just focus on providing OpenTelemetry data so you can build your own queries, because we are not great in making UIs, but the folks out there from the community are good. So we let them, or we give them all the resources to build the best dashboards that they can.
Yeah, you also don't want to trust me with a UI. Like, you also don't want to. I don't know if anybody's ever seen me give a slideshow presentation where I had to make my slides and nobody took a beautification pass. You don't get pretty slides out of me. That's not a thing that happens. So I feel that acutely. So going back to some of the other pieces of Keptn, I guess, is there any in like the where does Keptn do things like provide templates or provide like things to like pre-checks, for example? Is there like a pre-checks template that does Keptn provide that, as opposed or versus just supporting it? Like, where do you have like kind of some templates or pre-existing examples to help people who maybe are like earlier on in their application development journey comparative to, okay, we expect you to bring your own here?
Yeah, so we provide out of the box some examples, I think, in these slides. Yep. We present those, not all of them, to be honest, but many of these out of the box. So you can reference them from our repository. I will find the link after when Flo takes over with the demo and post it in the chat so you can have a look at those. We have also a demo folder in our main repository, Keptn/lifecycle operator. And you can use those to start coding your checks. The issue is everyone is a snowflake, everyone has their own special case, and it's impossible to cover 99% of the case. What we see though is everyone wants to get a notification and promotion of artifacts across stages. So for the notification, we provide a handy-dandy Slack integration. So you just provide your webhook, and then we send a message for you with all the information about what's happening. And for the promotion, Flo recently drove this implementation topic where we also help people to promote artifacts across different stages, from dev to hardening to prod to production 2, production 3, whatever. But also for promotion was quite hard to come up with a single task that can be a template for everyone, because every time we went around at KubeCon speaking with people and asking, how do you do promotion? So we can create some sort of template around this. We saw that everyone is different. Everyone does things differently because there are different requirements, different legislation where they operate. So at the end of the day, we said, okay, you do you provide us with a container, we run it at the best moment in time for you, and we provide you with the result of it. And that's our philosophy.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to ask that question because I think a lot of people, looking to get started. Yeah, I always like to say the presentation is always for the newest person in the room, right? So I don't have any more questions on this presentation.
So I don't know, maybe we can do a demo session.
Absolutely. Then I will take over the screen sharing. So allow to share screen. All right. I just hope everything will work because my cluster hasn't been too cooperative lately, but I deleted a couple of pods as a sacrifice to the demo gods. So I hope
that
I'm
might
in
work.
their favor now.
It's gonna work.
All right.
First time.
So what we're gonna look at today. Basically,
You
I
might need
want to show you. Yeah.
Zoom. Sorry, just because I know for folks
of
at home it can
course.
be a little bit smaller through the YouTubes. That looks, I think, pretty good. If
All
any
right.
of our usual YouTube checkers are on and can tell us for sure, I hope it's good for you too.
All right. Yeah, what I'm going to show you today is how you can actually make use of Keptn to deploy an application across multiple stages. Yeah, right. Like Giovanni mentioned, from dev to prod, for example. And with Keptn providing you full observability of the deployment across these stages. So for example, if anything goes wrong later in production, you would be able to trace back the deployment of a new version across the previous stages and inspect if there is something you didn't catch earlier in one of the development stages, for example. All right. And what I've prepared here is a very, very simple demo application called Simple App, a very creative name. And this is deployed via two Helm charts. One is called chart dev, the other one is called chart production, and those are the charts for the different environments we would like to deploy this application in. And the deployment is done via Argo. So here, if I go to my Argo UI, you will see one app for the deployment in the development stage and another instance of an application for the production stage. And yeah, having said that, let's have a quick overview of what's actually in those Helm charts. So the dev and the production chart are very similar, so they have the same deployments and whatnot. It's just that they will be deployed in different namespaces. Yeah, in terms of the values file, we have two services essentially where we can select or define which version of each service we would like to deploy, and then also the target response rate we would like to achieve for our service. So we're going to see in a couple of seconds what that means. And then another value we have here is the commit ID. And this is actually injected into the Helm chart via Argo. Let me just quickly check if I can find where this is set up. Exactly. So here in the manifest for the Argo applications, we have the possibility here via this Argo CD add provision environment to actually take the Git commit that caused a new deployment or a new sync with Argo and inject that into our Helm chart in order to make use of that. And yeah, let's have a look at the manifest for the app in the development stage. We're not going to have a look at each one of the resources, but just the most important ones that are required to get everything up and running. So the first, obviously, is the namespace we would like to deploy in. So in this case, it's called Simple Go. And in order to actually enable Keptn for this namespace, we need to add this Keptn SH lifecycle toolkit enabled annotation. And this will tell Keptn to actually observe everything that's happening in this namespace. And this will make the mutating webhook kick in whenever a new pod is attempted to start within that namespace. In terms of the application, we have two very simple deployments and related service for each of those. Now, what's required for Keptn here in terms of configuration? It's actually not a lot in order to already make use of the observability benefits that Giovanni described earlier. So what you will need to do is, in order to get those observability data, you need to add a certain number of labels to your deployments, which are the app Kubernetes IO and the app Kubernetes part of and the version label. So those three are required. Those are the officially recommended labels by Kubernetes. And these will help Keptn to automatically derive the related Keptn workloads. So for each deployment you will have, there's going to be a related Keptn workload based on the name here and the version. And then with the part of label, you will consolidate those multiple workloads into a single Keptn application that contains all of the workloads. So this is the way to relate them to each other, right? By the way, we're covering a lot of different topics here in this demo. So if there are any questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time. Yeah, so those are required to get the observability data, but with Keptn you can also do a little bit more. Like Giovanni said earlier, you can also perform certain checks during or after the deployment of a new pod or of a new version. So in this case, if, for example, you would like to do a post-deployment task for this, after this deployment has been deployed, you can also do that via adding a label. In this case, this is called Keptn SH post-deployment task. And in this case, we refer to a so-called Keptn task definition, which is called wait for monitoring. And what that means is, so basically we have a Keptn task definition with that name, and a Keptn task definition basically allows you to run any container you provide, so any custom logic, because Giovanni said earlier, every user has their own kind of implementations of certain tasks within the deployments, and therefore we provide the means to run any container. And this is very, very similar to a Kubernetes job. So that's actually what an instance of a Keptn task will create, right? And around that, or in addition to that, to creating the job, Keptn will also inject some contextual environment variables that the container can then use. So those information would be, for example, the name of the workload or the deployment that's currently being deployed, or the name of the Keptn app, and the version, right? And yeah, let's scroll down a little bit. We have a very similar deployment as well here, just because it's more fun with more deployments, and every deployment deserves a friend. But actually what you can also do is, yeah, so now we arrive at the Keptn app context resource. And this is basically, this allows you to do a little bit more even with Keptn. So first of all, this will enable you to also do pre and post deployment tasks and evaluation on an app level. So that means everything that's listed here in the pre-deployment tasks will be executed before any of the actual deployments are going to be entering their deployment phase. And what we have added here as an example is container that essentially checks for our monitoring source, in our case Prometheus, and verifies that this monitoring source is available, because since we are going to do some load tests after deploying our application here in the post-deployment task, phase, it wouldn't make much sense to kind of deploy into the dark when actually we don't have any monitoring solution up and running, right? And yeah, then after the post-deployment task phase, we are also able to define a post-deployment evaluation. And this, in this case, we would like to verify that our response time of our services meets a certain criteria. Let me just scroll down a little bit. Yeah, so here we are in the Keptn metric side of things. So here we actually have the Keptn metric resource. So this describes the query essentially we would like to send to Prometheus in order for acquiring the value for the response time. And then in the Keptn evaluation definition, we are referring to this metric here, right? So here we have the Keptn metric ref. So this links to this resource up here. And with our evaluation target, we say that we want to be smaller than what we have defined in the values file earlier for our target response rate. Yeah, that's that. And now we are, one more thing, which is basically the most essential thing for what I've actually promised you, the promotion task. So this promotion task is executed after all of the previous phases have finished successfully. So we have verified that we have our monitoring, we have deployed our new versions, we have done the load tests, and the response time is all right. And if all that is marked with a check mark, we would like to enter the promotion phase. And this is yet another container. And what this will actually do is it will trigger a GitHub action on this repository. And this GitHub action will then create a PR in order to basically apply what we have in the values file for the development stage in the production Helm chart. And in addition to that, it will also take the OpenTelemetry trace ID for this deployment, because we get this nice looking OpenTelemetry trace for the deployment in this stage, and we'll pass that on to the values file in the production chart. And this means that this trace ID will then be added as a link to the deployment trace of the development stage. We will see that later in Jaeger, then it should be very clear. Are there any questions so far?
No questions. I just want to say you're extremely quotable. Oh, actually, there's a question just came in. I'll come to that second. Oh. But you're extremely quotable, right? Every deployment deserves a friend. Not deploying into the dark. I'm gonna put things you say on the t-shirts in my joke t-shirt store.
Perfect.
Because I was like, these are very, very quotable statements. So there is a question. I'm going to go ahead and display it up here. So each dash under the spec, is it its own container?
Each dash under the spec. I assume you mean those here. Yes, I actually have a look at one of the task definitions here. So those refer to the Keptn task definitions, and I cannot speak and type at the same time. So
we forgive you. We'll exempt you from that. Just wait.
Okay, all right, so here we have an instance of that. So here we have our Keptn task definition, which looks very similar to, excuse me, to a Kubernetes job. And essentially here we define which image we would like to, which container image we would like to run as a part of this job. And in addition to that, here we have some environment variables, which are specifically for this particular container here. So this one can use that here. And this way you can define a certain number of hopefully reusable tasks that you can then refer to in your Keptn app context TRD or in the post and pre-deployment labels of your deployments. So that would be the way how to wire this up. Did that answer your question?
I'm going to hope yes, but there's always a
Yeah.
delay between when we ask that question, when the question reaches YouTube, and then when the person's able to type their answer into YouTube and it makes it back, right?
Okay. Yeah. In any
sure
case,
how
if
fast
there
that
are further
travels.
questions, we can come back to that.
Yeah, I'll interrupt you if they come back with additional questions. Go ahead.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. Now I've talked a lot, so now I will actually let Argo take a little bit of the work. So what we're gonna do now is we are going into the values YAML file of our chart in the development stage, and we are going to deploy a different version. So in this case, we would like to go back to version 1. We are going to commit the changes directly to the main branch, which of course is the perfect thing to do. And we are going to go to Argo. Now, eventually, Argo will sync that new state. Here, we'll force it to make that a little bit quicker. And now we're going to jump into the fun. You should see my terminal now. And
yes, your terminal is very pretty.
Yeah, thank you. That's the K9S IDE under quotation, which is very nice to use with Kubernetes. So what we're actually seeing here now is 2 new pods for our services, because we are about to deploy a new version. And actually the first Keptn task has already completed, which is the wait for Prometheus that we saw earlier. So now we verified that Prometheus is up and running. And eventually, in the miracle of time, this means that our new pods are actually allowed to go into the running phase. So soon we should see that. Of course, we can. Okay, I've talked long enough, so to bridge the awkward waiting time. So now that 2 new pods are actually running, and we are now waiting for their individual Prometheus targets, or we have waited. So this just makes sure that we have the Prometheus target for the backend service and the service. I'm not very good with naming, but I hope it gets the point across. And now that we have waited long enough for the targets, our post-deployment load tests are now starting. So those will run for a minute or so. And while they're doing that, we can also, this is of course the nice thing about having everything done via Kubernetes custom resources. You basically get the API for free, and also with K9S without any additional configuration effort, you can observe the state of the related Keptn resources here. So here, for example, we see which phase we are currently in. So in this case, we're in the post-deployment tasks phase, which is the execution of the load tests, and we see the result of the previous phase. And hopefully now I've talked long enough. Yes, so the load tests are completed, and in a couple of seconds we should see another pod, which is the promotion task, appear. Usually it's a little bit quicker, but let's give it a little bit more time because it's already quite late here. Maybe let's also look at the workload versions. So those represent the versions for the individual services we just deployed. And now if we go back to the pods, We should hopefully see it or not. Of course, this is all live and in color, so it may take a little bit longer.
I was going to say your sacrifice to the demo gods was inadequate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and here, of course, you can also go into the YAML file and have a look at the detailed status of the phase. Okay, and we're actually in the post-deployment evaluation phase. And we can also, of course, inspect the evaluation. And yeah, actually Keptn did what it's supposed to, because our response time is too high. So it didn't go into the promotion phase, which actually is exactly what should happen. And now, to demonstrate what Keptn can help us with here is we can go to Jaeger, and here we now have one instance of our deployment traces, right? So this would be the deployment trace of what we have just attempted to deploy. And one nice little detail here is here in the attributes. Yeah, exactly. So this is the commit ID that we were injecting via the Argo CD environment variable into the Keptn app context, and everything that's in the Keptn app context here is added as OpenTelemetry attributes here. So here in this trace, we then can also trace back which commit ID caused this bad deployment here. And if we scroll a little bit down, we see the deployment phase was successful. Also, the pre-deployment tasks were successful, but actually in the post-deployment evaluation, we unfortunately noticed, or fortunately, because we wouldn't want to go this into production, we noticed that the response time of our service was simply too high, right? This is, of course, unfortunate because it won't go into production now, but that's not an issue because just like the TV chefs, I've prepared something before that. So this would be an instance of the deployment into the production phase, which was promoted successfully because the response time was indeed within our targets. And here you can see under the span references, you will see the reference of to the okay, in this case, the trace is not found. But in an ideal world where Jaeger wasn't restarted a couple of times and still has all the data, you will here get to the previous deployment trace in the previous deployment stage, right? And this will then allow you to trace back even across multiple stages in case something went wrong. Yeah. Now I've talked a lot. Maybe, are there any questions in the meantime?
No, I think that was pretty clear. I know this is a demo cluster, so I'm assuming there are maybe some things here that are just inconsistent with real life. But so with your example just now, right? Your API response times were too high, so we didn't go into the promotion phase, right? Did you have something monitoring to API response times in the pre-checks to demonstrate that that's a different situation? In other words, did we get a real signal, or should we assume this is a real signal, or was there a chance that there's something else going on with the cluster that's causing API response times to be high, and we falsely failed our promotion? And then so corollary to that, is there an easy way to actually, instead of a hard number on response times, although you shouldn't promote things when your cluster's in a bad state anyway. So we're going to caveat that. Is there an easy way with Keptn to actually have the metric, instead of being a hard like 10 or 2 seconds or 2 milliseconds or whatever it was, actually be a percentage, so no more than 5% higher in response time than current?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So in this case, this is up to the monitoring solution you're using. So pretty much anything that can be retrieved via a Prometheus query in this case, or any monitoring provider you're using, you can map into a Keptn metrics value by providing the correct query. So I'm not a big Prometheus expert, to be honest, but for example, if you do a blue-green deployment, right, and have the previous version of a service running in parallel to what you're currently trying to do, you could then, for example, write a query that gets you the value of both the blue and the green deployment, and then calculate a percentual increase or decrease in response time with that query. And then you could, for example, say my post-deployment evaluations are only successful if my response time, for example, doesn't increase by 10%, for example.
I mean, that sounds correct to me.
So does this? I don't want to say replace. That's a harsh, like very final, like word. Right? This looks like it does has some similarities with Argo rollouts, right? Where you're monitoring a deployment, you're rolling something out, you're checking the metrics to say, hey, look, this thing it's exceeding the threshold of acceptability, right? On what we're willing to accept for this app. Don't roll it out. Is this a competitor to that, or is this like is this parity to that, or is this like is this something that you could integrate with rollouts, take some of the capabilities from rollouts, integrate it into Keptn, and then just make Keptn, like Keptn Plus, or I don't know what you want to call it, but like it makes Keptn that much more usable if you're already integrated with some of these other tools like Argo events and Argo rollouts and workflows and all that stuff.
That's a great question. With Argo rollouts in particular, what you can do, for example, in order to use and integrate both with each other, you could, for example, make use of the Keptn metrics resource to define the metrics you would like to collect, also from multiple monitoring sources, and then refer to these metrics within Argo rollouts. So as I recall, Argo rollouts provides the means to, for example, retrieve metrics from a Prometheus instance, yep. Right? Yep. And Keptn also comes with a Prometheus endpoint that exposes the values of all the Keptn metrics you have defined in your cluster via a Prometheus endpoint. And this is a nice way of making them available to Argo rollouts in order to base the decision on the value of those metrics. So it can definitely exist in parallel with that and works nicely with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that way you get because you're looking at a bunch of tools right now, right? Like you get Jaeger up for the tracing and stuff like that, which is awesome. So you think about a big picture and like an organization, right? Most people are probably gonna have Service Mesh or Istio, right? And Jaeger and all that stuff probably going somewhere. Then you have Keptn, and now you've got like Argo CD and Argo rollouts, and maybe all or just a combination of some of them. But it's nice to be able to have like a little fist bump in between them where you can maybe have one interface that still talks to all the tools instead of like having to go to the Argo CD UI and then go to the Keptn UI and then go to the events UI. You know what I mean? So it's nice that you guys have kind of put that together.
And on top of this, sorry, I wanted to say that on top of this, we are working with the CI/CD OpenTelemetry standard to also unify how we propagate the context across the different tools. So we can create a single trace that describes everything that's happening in all the different tools.
That's awesome. Yeah, Yes, because at some point, right? Like we're always worried about security, so we need to be able to go back to that thing, like all the way through and figure out like, okay, what did this thing actually touch? Like how do we do that, right? And that's that ID right now from your guys' perspective is how we would do that, right? You go back and you can see it all the way through.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
pretty awesome.
I was looking to see if there's any corresponding like documentation or examples of Keptn with Argo rollouts, and there is definitely for V1, right? That was definitely a thing. SEO is not giving it to me for V2. So if you happen to have any good examples on that, handy, we can pop them into the chat. If not, that's fine. People know how to Google search faster than I do, probably. I'm also having like the worst day with typing accuracy. Like, I think everybody knows I'm dyslexic, and it's hilarious that I became a software engineer. I'm just not typing accurately today, so I give up. we're taking away my keyboard. I'm done. It's over. I'm gonna go get lunch after this. So I don't think I've mistyped Keptn 5, 6, 7 times today. Two of those ended up
happens to me 10 times a day.
It's what is it? 1, 2, 3, 5 letters? Come on.
You should do type to text or talk to text and then mumble and then see how that works.
And then mumble.
That's my problem. Yeah.
I give up. Generally speaking, we don't have. I don't see any questions from the audience in the comments. This was great. It's good to see, how Keptn has evolved over the years. I don't know. Whenever the last time it was. And yeah, we are like really right at time. So I'm kind of like, I don't know how we want to navigate the last 2 minutes. I think we can just call it. It was a great demo, and we appreciate you all coming on and talking more about all of the things. Johnny, did you have final thoughts?
I just wanted to ask, like, is there anything else that you guys wanted to, like, what's next, right? Like, is there something that you guys are like really excited about that's coming out in the next, quarter, month or so? Because I mean, it seems like a pretty lively project.
I think you touched a nice button before about integrating better with Argo, because in Paris at the last KubeCon, at ArgoCon, Andy did a presentation about how Keptn loves Argo and how Argo loves Keptn, and how we can integrate better these two tools. And the main goal going forward is to integrate better with other tools, and in particular Argo. That's what we'll be focusing on in the next months.
Nice.
Yeah, I actually found an open issue for exactly that on the GitHub repo as I was kind of like poking through things. So yes, I can definitely see it is in the high priority list of things that people are looking at. In general, here is the Keptn repo, a set of repos. Actually, it seems to be a collection project in GitHub for the audience. I sent some other links previously, but I think that should give everybody the overview. And I think you're all on the CNCF Slack, right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So you can always, if you're not a member of the CNCF Slack, go sign up for that. I'm not going to find the link right now. Go sign up for that. Go ask questions. Join the community. Keep the discussions going in the usual places. I think so. For us on GitOps Guide, in 2 weeks, we're going to be joined by Marty Jackson, a Red Hatter. As you all may remember, last stream, I was like, I got to get you back on here, right? So Marty's going to come back. Marty and Jonny are actually on the same team. And we are going to talk about validated patterns. So join us for that on May 16th. Until then, say goodbye to our lovely guests. Say goodbye to our lovely hosts, as I'm talking about myself. And until then, choose your technical debt wisely. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you.